You're listening to the Business Wealth Impact Podcast, your source for empowering information and cutting-edge ideas from the world's top minds. I'm your host, Jeanne Amlour, founder of seven-figure coaching company, Jeanne Amlour International. Join me on a journey to unleash your potential and create your highest success. Welcome to Business Wealth Impact. Hello and welcome to another wonderful show with Jennifer Gligoric, who is our guest. She helps entrepreneurs scale, reclaim vision, and lead boldly. And she's also the host of the Super Clinic Project. Welcome, Jennifer.
Thanks for having me, Jeanne. I'm so excited to be here. I was excited when you were on my show. I feel like our audience just loved it, and I'm excited to be here in the same way for you guys.
Awesome. Okay, Jennifer, I was excited to have you because I want to hear more about your take on ethical entrepreneurship, because I feel like there's a real space for this conversation more and more and more. So what got you to this, and what are your ideas on ethical entrepreneurship?
Well, I'm a business crisis intervention specialist. So usually CEOs or business owners get me when things aren't going exactly the way they want them to, right? And I noticed that there seems to be more and more of a disconnect. And I noticed it also too, going to networking events. You know, I like to network, especially with female entrepreneurs. And there just seemed to be a disconnect after a while. Like, I want to make a lot of money. There's this big push, and it's been that way. I talked about since the 80s, right? You know, greed is good. We're going to go out there, and then it just got to where everybody was a coach. Everybody just was pushing these ideals, these very hyper aggressive ideals of be a millionaire, make money now, grind set, and the disconnect became more and more, and you have people working. And then when you ask them, well, but why? Why do you want to become a millionaire or a multimillionaire, a billionaire? Just why are you doing what you do? And they couldn't really say, right? I need money. I've got to pay my bills. Well, it's just what I've always wanted. It was very vague, and it was not connected to their divine purpose. Like, what were you really put on this planet to do? And do you feel like you got a good beat on that? Like, maybe like, when they get me, yeah, I know what I'm supposed to do. It's just not really working. I need a little bit of help now. I don't know what I don't know. Please help me bridge the gap, right? They were really not doing what they're supposed to do, right? And so I realized that we need to talk about that more, because when you get it right, the whole business aligns right. Everything thrums with a different type of energy.
Okay, so there's two different things there. There's being aligned with your, divine purpose, as you were saying.
Mm-hmm.
But there's also, that's not the same as being unethical, because if you're doing something that's not really your purpose, that's not really unethical. It's just you're not where you want to be, right? So now what about the ethics part?
Because they're not ethical with themselves, and they tend to not make good decisions in the business that align with their ethics, because money and making a profit becomes more important than the people, becomes more important than them, because they end up becoming the worst boss on the planet. They don't have work-life balance. They don't value the staff. They're managing incorrectly. They have tons of HR issues that become systemic problems throughout the entire business. And they really aren't doing well with the customers either. So I would counter that and say, you'd be amazed about when people aren't aligned, how really the end result is pretty unethical. They're the first people to want to go out and say, let's not hire a neighbor because they need a living wage. Let's go and hire someone in a country that violates human rights and where I don't have to hire a thing, and I don't have to worry about how they're being treated. They make little decisions like that because the bottom line is more important than what they're really supposed to be doing. And then you realize that they've made all these little decisions, and it piles up to them being very unhappy.
Okay, so a lot to unpack there. So you mentioned something about hiring people in other countries. Well, a lot of us hire VAs in other countries where they're not being mistreated. What are you talking about there? Like, they're hiring people with companies that are fulfilling and they're being underpaid, but is there something, you're not talking about virtual assistants, right?
No, it depends. It depends on if you know that, there comes a point in time, and I know this really triggers people because I've had VAs, I've worked with people, I work even now with people all over the world, right? But it comes to a point where there are some decisions where you're just looking at, oh, I could get somebody for $3 an hour. There's still $3 an hour people on Upwork. And then they won't understand how they're not getting the work out of them, right? And you have to really explain that nobody can live on that anywhere on planet Earth. That because of globalization, there is a certain baseline, and you could actually hire somebody probably local for what would actually propel your business forward, right? And so it's taking the mindset of, do you want someone that you're going to have to constantly be doing the work for them, editing them, chasing after them, not getting it? Or do you want someone that's an actual expert? And what does that look? And when we actually unpack that and look at that HR problem, and I've done this in many other companies that have other VAs, then you make different decisions. It doesn't mean that you probably won't hire from a good company that's overseas and has somebody. It's just you look at the problem differently.
Right.
And then you make a better decision for you, and you spend less time on the editing and chasing and oversight and wondering why you can't get what you want, and I should just do it myself, and taking an end product to propel it forward that's better for your clients or your patients or whoever.
Right. Well, the thing is, it's if you want help, get help. And we've all made that mistake of hiring somebody that just wasn't good, and whether it was expensive,
local or not,
expensive, local, cheap or not. I mean, I've hired local people that weren't cheap, and they were the same as the $9 people on Upwork. So it just really, it's not always that, but it's very true that you cannot expect to hand your business over to somebody that's getting paid, $3 an hour, and expect them to do a great job, because if they could do a great job, they would be you, and they would be making the money you're making. So those people, if you are hiring people that are VAs, you have to just give them tasks and not expect them to run your business for you and then be upset.
Yeah, and a lot of people do. I can't tell you how many doctors I've worked with that really aren't running their clinics. It's an office manager that's usually not paid for that. That's not really their job, but yet all the major decisions, who they're going to use for marketing, what they're going to do, who's actually taking the numbers from the front desk and looking at those numbers so they can make data-based decisions, that they're not even involved in any of that, but they've put that out, and it's either just completely not being done, or it's being done very poorly because they've got this wealth of other things to do. And in essence, they've outsourced being the boss, and that's why they're not moving forward. And so it's taking ownership of the mindset that you need to be, you have to have a CEO mindset if you're running a company, any company, even if it's yourself. But then you also pull yourself away, and you have to have the shareholder mindset.
So the thing about alignment, when I was an actress, everybody said, I just want to act. Okay. Very few people make a living off acting. Okay. So I've been on the pendulum of years that we're just going to do this because we want this to work and this is what we love. That's just sometimes not realistic. So there is some sort of balance where you have to make a living, and it might not be what you're passionate about. It might be something you're good at. It's not unethical, but it might not be the passion. It might just be something you're good at and you enjoy. So I happen to do something I love. Okay. Coaching. I'm lucky I found it after doing many things. Is every single thing I do in my business fun? No, it's not. So we have to try to get I get as many people to help me as possible and farm out whatever I can, because that's really important, as you said, for just life quality, not to be doing everything yourself. And also my, hourly, what I'm worth, it'd be silly to do things myself, right? Because whatever I'm paying is going to be cheaper. So where, that's hard. Can you help people with that? Like, how can they do something that might not be their passion? Because maybe they just want to paint or act, and that's probably not going to work for most people, right?
Well, not for most people, but there are people who make a living on it. But usually by the time they come to me, they've already invested an entire lifetime of education and experience to get somewhere. Like I asked, what made you decide to start this marketing firm or your healthcare clinic? Well, I'm a doctor. I want to heal people. right? I work with, let's say, a lot of chiros. I believe that, there's a holistic way for us to get well that doesn't involve pharmaceutical medicine or surgery. And I want I want as many people as, they can to understand that we can live and move great forever. Okay, let's talk about that passion. Because when we first talked, you didn't have it anymore. So how do we get back to that? Usually to start a business, there is some passion there for it. And it's how do we get back to that and take you out of, it's usually admin and fulfillment, because those are the biggest bottlenecks, and see how you can propel that business forward or move into your center of happiness. And that way you can offload the things that are really sucking you dry, or let's see what really is the bottlenecks. A lot of time it's HR issues. They've surrounded themselves with people who are not married to that main vision that really got them where they were, or they're keeping them stuck, into, well, this is just how we do things. It'll be too hard to get a new CRM there. We've got to do it this way because, it's going to be, they literally talk the boss off the ledge because they don't want to do the work.
Wow.
Because, and so understanding that people who got you there may not be the people who are going to get you to where you need to be. But it always goes back to, what's my divine purpose? Am I working on this? Okay. So how am I going to do it? Because there's 3 ways to scale. The first thing you need to do is, what am I doing? How can I do it the best I can do? That means you have systems and processes you have to put in place. That's the busy work. That's the spreadsheets, the SOPs, all the little things, right? And when you get that system down to where you have a good system to attract people in, get them in, then how can you do more? That's the second thing you'll do. And then only after that, how can you do something add it? And then your own clients will tell you what to add. So, there's this process to really grow, but most people skip to shiny object syndrome or what's going to make me happy again. Well, that looks like fun. I think it'll make money, but they go away from their path of purpose. A great example of that is Jessica Alba and her company, the Honor, I believe it's the Honor Company.
The Honest Company.
Had a path of the Honest Company. That's what it was. Honest Company. They became a unicorn billionaire valuation, very hyper-focused on children. Then all of a sudden they got really popular and they brought in some new people who said, we're going to not have locally sourced manufacturing. We're going to go all over the world. The quality dropped. They started adding all these products on and it started tanking. And then everybody's like, well, that's what you get when an actress is, whatever. She got a lot of, she's a very smart cookie, but she got a lot of guff for that. And they went back to what is our purpose and actually shrunk all that, went back to it. And now they're back up as this unicorn company. So that is it on a very big scale of when it works. And when you start going outside of that, how it doesn't.
That's interesting you say that, because I was looking at like the ingredients in some of the Honest Company's products and the chemicals. And I thought, well, this isn't very honest because these are toxic chemicals in here. Because I thought, I must have been, maybe they've taken all the toxic chemicals out again.
Yeah, they changed the formulas on it, and you're not the only one who noticed that.
It was terrible because it wasn't honest. It was, to me, a bad joke. I thought, this isn't honest. What is going on here, Jessica? So I'm glad that she, got her purpose back, because that's dishonest to say it's honest, but we got all these toxic chemicals that I wouldn't put on my skin. So, right. Okay.
Yeah.
So how do people do this? And people struggle with this. How do they get to a point of, my business is, apart from the work we have to do, the busy work has to be done, but my business is something that does make me happy because it is part of my life mission, at least, right? How do people do that? Because I think it's hard for people that are in jobs, that they're in the job because it's been the job they're in and they can't just quit the job, or they're in a business and it's going okay. I think it's scary for people to say, hey, I'm just going to reevaluate everything and get back or get anywhere, because I think a lot of people do just start businesses because it's going to make money.
Yeah, I think COVID was the greatest example of, well, what happens if you're forced to? And during COVID, when we were forced to not do nothing, you couldn't just go back to work. You could not stay comfortable anymore. We were literally forced globally in this horrific event, right? And then what happened? You see millions, like, just look at TikTok. An entire other economy grew. It grew globally, but really the United States. I'm so proud of us as Americans for what they were able to do. People were like, what can we do? And it got, well, maybe I could do these dances. I can do this. What do I like? Like this one lady, she was I was looking at her story. So she was a chemical research scientist. That's what she did. She got laid off. You're not, whatever. So she's sitting there twiddling her thumbs, and she really liked Harry Potter. And she goes, you know what? I know how to put these chemicals together that can do cool things. And I love the look of these interesting things. So she started getting crafty, creating these things, putting it in bottles and putting the wax and then wrapping the wax and then creating like dragon's breath, whatever. And you would shake it, it would change all these colors. And it's just, and all it is a tchotchke that is cool. Literally made more money in this business that she is still doing than she ever did as a research scientist. And she's not the only one. There were people who just started handicraft. They started doing all the stuff you'd think you could never make money at. And yet they managed to do it because they actually had a business sense. They followed up. They tracked leads. They decided to be serious about the business and what they tracked and their numbers and putting the work in, which at that time, we're going to do a bunch of videos talking about how it's cool, reaching out to these people, telling us it's cool, saying, hey, let me make you a bottle. Will you talk about it? Will you send me a thing? And just really going out there with that. So you can say it can't be done, but then we did it. They did it en masse. They did it in such a way that it was so upsetting to so many of the biggest powers in the world that they said, well, we're going to have to shut that down because, and they look through their file of excuses, the data's bad. Now, Google and everybody has our data. There's somebody right now in a third world country calling me from Wells Fargo that has everything about me, that has sold my information 15 times over. But somehow this one app was data, and it was because we created another economy on it. So if people tell you can't, or it's not possible, that's lies. It's horrific lies. It's not true.
So what happened to this company?
Which one?
The one that you said they wanted to shut down because of the data.
TikTok. They're still up.
Oh, that was TikTok?
That's TikTok.
Wow.
TikTok created there's something like 9 million small businesses just in the US alone were created on TikTok.
Got it. Yes, that was a problem when they shut TikTok down for a few hours.
People freaked. They went to the red note. They'd said, okay, finally, we'll just straight download to China. We're so unserious as a nation, right? Fine. Okay, we'll just give it to China. Fine. That's what we'll do. Let's see what we can do.
The thing was, there's so many people, their livelihood depends on TikTok. So you can't just do that all of a sudden. That was a problem. A lot of people were all upset. And I said, don't worry, they'll get it back up. And it was up a few hours later.
Yes.
Okay. Wow. So she was selling on TikTok.
Yeah, she's still selling on TikTok. I forget her name, but I remember thinking, this is great. Like the little part of me that isn't so jaded with my Black and Gen X heart went, like we can still do it, dream your dreams, and I see people do it in all different things now, like I worked with a physical therapist working for somebody else, wanted to start a new thing, very young, early 20s in LA, Orange County, very difficult. Rents are out the roof. Get her to open up something, but she wanted to focus on just runners. And everyone told her that's a stupid, terrible idea. I didn't. And guess what? After getting the first landlord screwed her over, didn't open it up, she had to go and try to find some other place last minute after she'd already told the one person. I mean, everything that could go Murphy's Law wrong for this poor little girl was going wrong. But in the end, guess what? There's a ton of runners who want someone who understands a runner's mindset, and they want to know how to recover. They want to know how to keep on running, from 5K people to those weekend warriors to people with big running. And now she's doing bang up business.
Fantastic. Well, actually, runners is a big market. All the marathons and
Yes.
everything. I would never say to somebody, "Oh no, there's no market with runners."
Yeah. But that's what they told her is a
Well,
newish PT that was out
right.
there, right? Like,
Well, okay. Well, a lot of people say stuff
yeah, they do say stuff.
as an opinion. Right. Right. Don't listen to everything you hear.
No.
Okay, so Jennifer, how can somebody what's the checklist to run an ethical business as far as you're concerned? You're saying, that ethical entrepreneurship. What's a checklist that people can go through and say, okay, here's my checklist that I'm going to go through just to see if I can make my business ethical, or maybe I think it's ethical, but now Jennifer's telling me maybe it's not. So, what's a checklist that people can go through just to make sure that their business is ethical?
I don't know unless you're doing something bad, I probably wouldn't tell you it's not ethical. I would just say, what is your divine purpose, right? And do you feel like you have a
Mhm,
good beat on things? And that's the
mm,
very first thing. And
mhm,
and I mean this in the most broadest sense. If I were to ask you, so do you feel like what you're here on this planet that you're getting to where you feel like at the end, if I tell you to tell me about your funeral and what legacy you want to leave
mhm,
for your family and your kids, do you feel like you're on a good path for that legacy? Do you feel like maybe not every day, maybe not every month you hit it, but are you making those things to get to that? And there's some people who say yes, and there's some people who say no. The people who say
mm,
no are going to be very miserable. So, number one, are you a yes? Okay. If you're a yes, that's great. If you're a no, then what's stopping you? Right? Because you
mm,
have to get to that. And that could be a million reasons. That'd take us hours to go through all the reasons. But if you are, uh, then then what you need to do is then think about your business. Okay. Because I talk to entrepreneurs. So I'm hoping you're an entrepreneur and you own your own business. Okay. So how is that business purpose? And it needs to be pretty
mm,
well defined, right? So
mhm,
if you were, let's say, a chiropractor, why are you in business? I want to help the people of New York City and Queens not have lower back pain so they can live their best life and understand that they don't need drugs or surgery. And I
mm,
want to say, wow, how do you do that? Then you have to have a promise.
mm,
Well, I have a 3-month program where I've developed blah, 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 and I can get them there without that. That's amazing. Tell me more. You've got to be able
mm,
to have that conversation, this purpose that that everyone on your staff knows what it is. And they don't say, oh, I work for a doctor's office. Wrong answer. They've all got to know the
mm,
purpose. And when someone says, well,
mm,
how do you do that? They've got to know. You've got to be laser
mhm,
focused on that. And you've got to have a
mm,
product to get them there to this end result that they want. And so if you can do that, then you need to track what your biggest goal is. So let's say if your goal is somewhere pie in the sky, I just want people to love us. Okay,
mm,
great. How will you know when that happens?
mm,
Well, they're going to give us referrals, 5-star reviews. They're going to become lifetime members. They're going to upsell into this. Okay, great. What did they do last month for that? And how can we push that forward this month? You're going to have to track it.
mm,
And if you can just do those basic things and look at those numbers, you'll always be pushing forward because you got to be in a grow or die type of mindset in business and in life and always looking toward that goal. That is like the first thing you can do because everything then becomes so aligned to that from how you hire, how you treat people, how you're working with your clients that you're just going to get there. So that would be my advice.
got it. It's really interesting when you said about your funeral because that reminds me of this book called Awareness, the opportunities, and it's called The Perils and Opportunities.
I'm going to write that down.
Uh, it's an Anthony DeMello.
Anthony
Yeah, it's called Awareness, the Perils and Opportunities of Reality. And this is a great book. Anthony DeMello, D.E. Mello. He was actually an Indian Catholic priest.
Really,
He
really.
wrote a lot of books.
Okay.
This book is amazing. I've had this book. I just got goosebumps for many years.
Okay.
And I gave this book to all my friends. And I picked the book up and I'll forget it. And, you pick a page up. But there was something in that book that changed my life. And the book said, always remember every day, imagine yourself. And it sounds macabre, but it's not. Imagine yourself every day in your going to dust. And it brings you to what you just said at your funeral, which is the same thing. That's where we're all going to end up. We're all going to die despite the AI people thinking we're going to live forever. Okay, we won't. We're all going to die. We are going to die. I'm going to personally, I will die at some point. I don't know about you, Jennifer, but so the point is, when I read that, I thought, wow, that is mind blowing because that's true. And that is reality, the perils and opportunities of reality. And when sometimes I do think of that and I think, wow, all of this is passing. What do I want to do in this life? And that was the reason he wrote that was like, you're going to be there.
Yeah.
You got to really plan your pathway to that point of what's that like. So I like what you said. And it's not like I haven't heard that before, but his goes further is just imagine yourself in the coffin going to dust, dust to dust. And people say to me, that's so macabre. It's reality because it will happen. But Americans tend to have this sort of horror of actually thinking we're going to die. It's the strangest thing. Europeans don't have that, and South Americans certainly don't have that.
You know, one of the worst panic attacks I ever had was when I was in Ireland, and I was actually engaged to an Irish dairy farmer at that time. I was very young, very great, crazy, right? And he took me to Clonmacnoise, which is the oldest monastic site in Europe. It's right on the River Shannon, and they have this broken apart piece of land, and then they have like this crumbling ruins on it, and they're talking about the centuries and villages and people and stuff. And I was like, and that castle, like, where, you know, who built that castle? And they're like, we don't even know. That was a long time ago. And suddenly I just kind of like melted, and I was like sitting on the ground. It was kind of cold. It was January, and my hands, I was like sticking that into the dirt because I had this feeling that I would just be lifted up. It was the weirdest feeling, and I was panicking. And he said, what's the matter with you? Like, no. And he was embarrassed. And I said, if they can't even remember who kings or queens are who could build a castle like that, who's going to remember me? Because here in America, we don't have things that are eons that people can't even remember what it is. We're not constantly looking at that. It's not everywhere we drive.
Well, we're young. I mean, we're babies. There's no real,
you know.
There is the oldest structure in America. It really isn't that old.
Well, they've told us about. I mean, we do have old structures that they've tried to erase from history, right?
I mean, they're underground now.
Yes, they're underground now.
Right.
Like, yeah. But yeah, like, you know, and it freaked me out. That whole
because
idea.
we realize they can't even remember these people. What about us? But, you know, that's a very good point. So, well, thank you for all this. This is great insight. And, you know, also insight on being, you know, I personally like hiring people from other countries. If at one point I made it a point to sort of try to employ a whole village in Philippines, I said, hey, and what about this? And they said, oh my goodness, yes, they need a job. So I realized that if I had one guy that was great. I said, what about your friend? And he said, yes, that'd be great. I said, anybody in your village that needs a job, send them to me. And he said, that would be great. So I felt like there was some mission there, and they weren't bringing any money. And was I paying them the same as Americans? No, because they're Filipino VAs and we know they're going to be cheaper than an American, right? But I felt there was mission in that I was giving people that had no job a job, and they were grateful for it. And I was paying them more than what they would be earning locally, which was important. So thank you for your insight, Jennifer, on all of this stuff. And yes, so the biggest thing is, you know, how are we living our lives, and think of ourselves at our funeral, and what are people going to say? And not that we care about what people say, it's just a reflection of a mirror of how we've lived our lives, right?
Yeah. What's your legacy? What do you really want to do? And do you have a good beat on things, you know? And if you don't, then ask yourself, what would I do if I weren't afraid? Because I guarantee you it's a fear that's keeping you from that. And you want to live fearlessly. There are good fears and bad fears, but you know, in general, if you say, what would I do if I weren't afraid? You're going to come up with what you should be doing, and go for it. Just go for it.
Okay, Jennifer, thanks so much. Thank you for listening. If you like this, please write a great review or subscribe, and we're going to see you on the next show.
You're listening to the Business Wealth Impact Podcast, your source for empowering information and cutting-edge ideas from the world's top minds. I'm your host, Jean Amlour, founder of seven-figure coaching company, Jean Amlour International. Join me on a journey to unleash your potential and create your highest success. Welcome to Business Wealth Impact.